I believe there should be some sound working its way down the tubes that form the internet. Everyone, how are you doing? It's episode 188. Why is UK infrastructure so slow and costly to build? What I should have done is put some, because it would have been relevant to the conversation, I should have put some COVID stats. We'll do that next week. Next week's going to be a news episode, so we'll do lots of catching up. Tease/spoiler alert. As ever, I have to speak in not so excitable tones because my daughter is being put down as we speak. I would normally be part of the process, but anyway, it's a real matter. This is why I'm a pretend. In fact, I think next week I might well do the 8 p.m. shift. It might not be permanent, but certainly I think at the moment it would make sense for me to do this at 8 p.m. Thoughts in the Discord. Anyway, enough of this. Everyone, I've got the cursor showing because we're going to have some PDFs up. All that remains is for me to say, actually, we're going to be talking about this thread. Sam Dumitriu's thread here. Sam and Ben did, actually not the thread. There was a thread, but the thread is based on an article on Sam's website. I don't know Sam and Ben's background. I don't know what their Britain Remade, the background of that think tank is. It's all very elusive. I'd be happy for people to inform. It doesn't look like it's saying all bad things, but there are quite a few things that I don't. I'm not sure about where so hi Sam and Ben, would love to chat, but basically this piece that they've written based on a bit of doing some quick sums on a decent list of projects across Europe and beyond, in fact, I think, but certainly in Europe, draws a conclusion that I see so many people drawing, and they draw a conclusion that I see Alan Levy and others making huge fusses about project costs and about that being the problem rather than a symptom. And I intend this episode to be explaining why that is the case. Because, everyone, let's get cracking. Welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. As the Intercity 225 fades away, fades from view, we start with some news. Yes, this is quite funny. Faisal Islam here, bringing up the news, having chatted with Sir John Armitt, the government's big transport bigwig, chair of the National Infrastructure Commission. Yes, pause the HS2 land sale, says government big project advisor. And in fact, if we scroll down this article, let's tell you what. Let me just move some crap out of the way here. There's some nuts. There's a mug. Oh, let's briefly show you that there's a mug. It's the Kant equation mug. That is my work mug. There are some big face. Oh, I'm looking a bit bleached out, aren't I? Let's do a bit of that. Hi everyone, it's me. We need the Wacom because I need to scribble on things. Right. Let's go over here and where is it? Hello, mouse. Let's go with this. No, let's click there and go with this. There, now this should work. No, because it's not. Everyone, it's not plugged in. Good grief! Oh, I think you probably all heard that little pippity pip. There we are. We're in. Hooray! Right. Okay. So here it is. Sir John Armitt warned there is a real risk that its plans would make the government. That is, there's a real risk that government's plans would make rail travel between Birmingham and Manchester even more congested. What do you mean, real risk? It is going to happen. It is going to happen. Don't use. You should not be in a senior position. Like if you're in that senior position, yes, your role is to just basically be to add credibility to whatever government's plans are. Yeah, okay, fine. Therefore, if you have any backbone, either you go into that role intending to tell them to Foxtrot Oscar when they say bad things, or you don't go into that role. If you have unless you're supine, you do not go into that role. Sir John Armitt. Anyway, so there he is on this screen here that I'm going to put back up in front of you, going, oh, there's a real risk that these plans would make rail travel between Birmingham and Manchester more congested. It's not a real risk. That is what will happen. Like, that is precisely what will happen, so say it. Anyway, government is, we're going to ignore all the government nonsense. Opposition has accused the government of salting the earth. That's my line. Sabotage. These are all, anyway, fine. Fine. But where's Sir John? Sir John here, chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, said the decision to sell property was a mistake and the options should be kept open. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake. I think that the land should be kept for at least 2 or 3 years to give the opportunity for people to revisit that and look at what can be done within that space and find a more cost-effective solution, not write it off today. That's kind of what he sounds like. I have been in a room giving evidence with him multiple times in Parliament. I'm disappointed because I think it's what we often describe as a sort of knee-jerk snap reaction. Yes, it is. Now, why? What might have given government the ability to do that, I wonder, Sir John Armitt? You might be reading, those in watching this on YouTube might be reading the Chiron here. Yeah, why? Now, remind me. What? Okay. Yeah, okay. So, Sir John Armitt, who's chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, does anyone remember what the National Infrastructure Commission knocked out about 3 years ago? Anyone remember? Oh, yes, that's right. It was the rail needs assessment for the Midlands and the North here, this rather happy-looking lassie. Rail needs assessment for the Midlands and the North. Now, what did that say? Let me just remind myself. Yes. It confused HS2's purpose. It put HS2 as in conflict with, rather than supporting and indeed enhancing regional and local connectivity. And it was directly taken and informed the Integrated Rail Plan, which, as you know, was the government cancelling the eastern leg of HS2 and basically setting the groundwork for it to then cancel the rest of the project as well. So Sir John Armitt, oh my goodness me, man, just you've absolutely around, and now you're going to have to find out. That's what happens, my friend. Anyway, if you want to find out about that document, it's an awful document, riddled with error. As with the fundamental error that breaks the Strategic Rail Links report and led to the Integrated Rail Plan. But again, his language, the language that he and his people who are working for him created, the language they have created is the language being used by government now to cancel HS2. I mean, there's a reason why Armitt is where he is. It's because he's weak, soft, and does exactly what government tells him to do. There's just a vivid memory of when he was asked why the NIC report scrapped the dedicated high-speed rail link to Liverpool, and a Mandarin just leaned in and basically leaned the microphone away and said no, he won't be answering that question. It's just like, if someone did that, if I was being paid as much as I was and I was in that position, I think I would Glasgow kiss the person who took the microphone and tell him what had happened. Anyway, he's wearing the hot dog suit. Yeah, he is wearing the hot dog suit. Anyway, yes, possibly Owen O'Neill is making an interesting point, which is I wonder if the NIC, the National Infrastructure Commission, all based in London, by the way, are more huffy about this because the IRP was considerably part of the basically consisted of what the NIC recommendations were. Yes, possibly, but I don't think they care particularly about the outcomes. I think Sir John Armitt has reached the limits of what he likes, and yes, possibly he is huffy because he feels like the IRP, the Integrated Rail Plan, was his thing. But anyway, yeah, not great. Is the sound all right, by the way? Aeroelastic is saying good vibrations down the tube, but hopefully that is not sarcasm. In any case, let me just. Sorry, I'm just going to talk a little quieter because I sense you might be picking some stuff up on the mic from the wee one is not too happy, so I'm going to really go quiet for now. Anyway, right, let's press on. So, another interesting news. Abolish the Treasury, says Whitehall. Yeah, there's been this review's been kind of going for a little while, which is a review to look into a review by a former cabinet secretary looking at what kind of big changes in Whitehall, and the main one is break the Treasury up. People often say, including some quite senior people, sort of think that I'm joking when I say abolish the Treasury. But hopefully, as you remember from the past episode of RailNatter and countless threads and things that I've talked about, I'm absolutely deadly serious that this absolutely needs to happen. We need to see the end of Treasury. It needs to be gone ASAP, because it's causing a lot of problems. But it's interesting that there is a potential that it might actually happen. Anyway, Anyway, that's enough of the news. 10 minutes of news. Let's talk about this piece. So this article, this little piece that Sam and Ben have created. I'm not saying it's tosh from top to bottom, not at all. I'm just saying that it is doing the classic thing to my mind of, you kind of go through and kind of understand. You kind of go through this thing and understand that it draws the wrong conclusion, as I've kind of alluded to at the start, as many other commentators do. They suggest that cost is the reason that we have these problems, when in actual fact it's very much not the case. I'm hoping that that I'll be able to make that point nice and neatly before the end of this episode. I've just realised. I just realised I need to type a thing. Right. Before I do that, though, let us talk about HS2. Need to talk about this project. So, okay, HS2 this is ostensibly not an HS2 episode, even though we're obviously going to talk quite a bit about HS2. And one of the things that we've seen a lot of kind of being quoted in the news and lots of other places, and even people kind of sort of ostensibly sort of supported the project, still kind of talk about this, the idea that costs on HS2 have spiraled. We've seen costs absolutely spiral. Is there any, okay, is there a truth in this? Yes, no. That's kind of partly what we're going to have a look at now. You can tell I'm typing the thing, can't you? The people in audio only are like, what's he doing? I'm actually typing the last slide, which I forgot that I needed to add. Sorry about that. There, fine. You'll like this. It's a necessary slide. Anyway, fine. Right. Costs on HS2 have spiraled. Yes, they have. Let me bring my little face up in the corner. Hello, everyone. I'm back. I'm back here in the corner. I'm desperately mildly checking my phone to see how the wee one's doing as well. It's just I don't want a little upset wee one. Anyway, costs on HS2 have spiraled. We're going to refer to a document from quite a number of years ago now, but it's from January 2020. It's a report by is this a type of the comptroller? Who's the comptroller? The comptroller, bonkers, and Auditor General. Basically, it's the National Audit Office looking at the numbers of HS2. There are multiple documents that were kicking around at this time looking at costs of HS2, and you know what? I'm going to stick with this one. It kind of fairly neatly lays out kind of an idea of the costs, it includes quite a few useful little graphics. One of them is just looking at High Speed 2 Phase 1. So the reason, so basically this is looking at the 2019 costs, the costs that came out at the end of 2019, which frankly is kind of the pre-IRP HS2, so before all the scopes start getting smashed to bits and bodged around with. And actually by this point, by 2019, the costs were fairly stable. And as I'll talk about in a minute, they continue to be pretty stable, relatively speaking. Raphael Nicolaus, breakup treasury, what does that mean specifically? Go watch the episode where we talk about abolishing treasury, and it's explained perfectly. So here's this nice graphic. So what have we got here? It's a waterfall chart, isn't it? That's what they call them. We have on the left-hand side here, we have the April 2017 estimates, so kind of a reasonably stable, the estimates starting to mature. This is just for phase 1. And then we have all of the ways that those costs have increased. So you see, in terms of in absolute terms, not relative terms, but absolute terms, where costs have increased, and in some cases where costs have decreased. These little blue lines here, costs have decreased, and then you can see there's a couple of numbers here, which is the estimate on the right hand side here. We have then the updated estimate, so all the things that have then been we can kind of ignore this one. These ones you can kind of ignore these, so don't worry about those ones. But basically, you've got all the things that have increased the cost from the 20.6 billion in April 2017, which are all these costs are in, I assume, will they be in 2019 prices? Anyway, it's kind of moot. Don't look at the absolute numbers, but because these things often get confusing with inflation, I'll sort this out in a graph in a minute. Don't worry. Up to, so from 20.6 to 30.7, so an additional kind of about a third extra onto the costs here, and so you can see the different ways. So nearly 5 billion of extra main civils kind of construction costs. The station build, a design and build, an extra $1 billion on top of that, nearly $1 billion in railway systems, and almost $1 billion in preparatory works and in HS2's own costs. 700 million on works to the existing railway network, and then the numbers get smaller here. 400 million extra on utility diversions. This is extra, so this is on top of the the previous estimates. So you can see all these as we've understood more, as we've done more surveys. It's clear that a load of not nearly conservative enough estimates have been made of everything. So, but it's a very useful graphic, and there are quite a few. There are quite a few within useful graphics within this document. This one here, by the way, you can Google it and download it. It's easy to download. So, and actually, they go through and give us pretty specific details of where those cost increases have laid. So, I think this is useful. This is just looking at HS2, just for a useful bit of context to look at where some of the phase one cost escalations have come from. I think, and this is increases in cost, not why is it expensive to start with, but increases in cost. And I think some of these can be quite useful and instructive. So just some of the things that we're talking about, extra costs of bridges, tunnels and earthworks as a consequence of DFT's requirements for HS2 becoming clear during the programme's design. Why weren't they clear from the start? Oh my God. They are. This some answers to some of the questions on the t-shirt here. Station design and build. Previous estimates of contractor overheads and design costs were based on other programs which underestimate the costs of HS2 stations. They underestimate the cost of new complex high-speed stations. That's the issue. So, and the next one, railway systems. This one's painful as well. Further development of the design has led to a better understanding of the work needed for systems, as in there was no work done on what the systems would need to be for the project, yes. And this one's particularly painful. The need for specialist skills has increased labour costs. Who thought that they wouldn't need specialist skills on this stuff? Baffling, absolutely baffling. Site preparatory works. Yeah, volume of work needed has been greater than anticipated as a result of issues such as the presence of asbestos and archaeological remains. Again, this is all because it was probably costed out of the initial assumptions to make the project look favourable for Treasury. HS2 costs, this is just some stuff about HS2 stacking it and assuming that some of the costs were within their budget that there weren't be, so they had to ask DFT for more money. DFT assuming that HS2 Limited's operating costs would get paid for by this is all people assuming someone else would pay for it. So DFT assuming that Avanti were going to pay some of HS2 Limited's costs, which obviously they would. Why would they do that? HS2 assuming that DFT were going to pay for some of their land and professional fee costs, and then the fact that this taking longer, so it means you have to pay everyone for longer within HS2. So all this stuff, existing network, wider network works, all not costing more, particularly Euston existing network stuff, although common existing network stuff all costing more, partly because, again, an accounting flaw, the cost rates being based on HS2's original estimates rather than using the Network Rail contractor estimates that are more accurate and higher, by the way. And then all this stuff, more utility diversions, the cost of properties being acquired was a lot higher than previously expected. Some other stuff. And then actually one of the savings was the government deciding to reduce the size of the rolling stock order from 60 to 54, which actually saved some money. So the project did have some savings here. And this one here, I don't know, I've scribbled all over that. It's because I've got me whacking sideways. Anyway, so this is the bit that all of you are waiting for, and this should be useful and interesting. So this is a little table. Here we have the cost basis. So like, what are these prices in? Like what are these prices actually from? These 2011 prices, 2015 prices, 2019 prices, and then the latest you can get from the Bank of England, which is August 2023 prices. So the first estimate was made, the first sensible estimate for HS2's cost was made in 2013. It was made in 2011 prices, which is why I've made the text all big. And the cost in 2011 prices was 50.1 billion for HS2, right? So, the next one, 2015, the next estimate came out and it had gone up from, now this is where you have to be careful, it was in 2015 prices, and this is the 56 billion that everyone quotes. So it was a 2015 estimate of 56 billion. But if we're going to put it in 2011 prices, it's only 52 billion, so it's only a £2 billion increase on the 2013 estimate. So that's not that's not a dramatic increase, and so if we actually, as we're going to do momentarily, you can see the August 2023 prices. We'll talk about those at the end, but it's only it's a marginal increase in cost, really. So then the next solid set of estimates was in 2019, and again it was started with Alan Cook's, the chair of HS2's stock take, and then later the DFT. So this is Alan Cook's stock take at the 2019 price, and it came up with, in 2015 prices, an increased cost of £78.4 billion. So there are 78.4 billion. And then another estimate came out. The DFT came up with an 88 billion figure. Now, part of me is not sure whether this was an accounting error, but in any case, let's assume, and that's in 2015 prices. So I think the NAO have got confused here, because DFT were saying that the 88 billion, I seem to remember the 88 billion being quoted in the stock take as the 2019 price. In any case, this is in the NAO report, so I'm going to take the numbers from the NAO report as read. So 88 billion in 2015 prices. Okay, so what does this mean today? Because Truss blew up the pound. So what does this actually materially mean for prices? So if you have everything in August 2023 prices, the original estimate of HS2's cost was 70.4 billion, right? This is for the whole thing, by the way, the originally as planned, including Goulburn Link, Eastern Leg. So 70.4 billion. So from 2013 to 2015, the estimate went up by about 4% to 73 billion. So not very much. By 2019, as all the extra detail and stuff had emerged, that had increased to a 32% increase. So it increased from 70 to 103 billion. And then the 2019, the kind of the DFT estimate, that more conservative estimate, suggested that it would be 116 billion in today money. So they couldn't see the future today. They didn't know that Truss was going to go full Institute of Economic Affairs and set fire to the economy more. But 116 billion is the today prices. So in today prices, the full HS2 project was being predicted as costing 116 billion versus 70 billion. So that's adding, what is that, an extra 46 billion to the cost. That's quite a lot of extra money. But it's more than HS2's costs increased by, but it's only a 40% increase on that original budget. Like 70 to 116 billion does not sound as dramatic as often you hear people saying, well, it was originally going to be 30 billion. Nowhere was it ever going to be 30 billion. 40% increase in cost is not that dramatic for such an enormously over-complex, way too much in one scope project. I see that as quite impressive. And as lots of you are pointing out, it's nothing compared to what, like that's 1 year of NHS funding for a 120-year, plus railway that would have transformed, the rail network, fundamentally transformed the way the rail network works. So yeah, they're the price of HS2. So the idea the costs are spiraling, I don't buy into that. I don't think that's actually an accurate representation. And indeed, if we hop to the kind of the 6-monthly report to Parliament made in June this year, here it is. Hugh, Patreon people, I need to have a chat with you about what Hugh and I said when Hugh was very rosy-cheeked at the National Rail Awards. Some things to say about that. Anyway, overview. Yes, the Patreon people get that because they pay me, and therefore I can trust them to not share things around. But anyway, value. So overview of this, and you can see, let's scroll down all this chaff. Fine, whatever. Program update, fine. Affordability. They're saying, okay, they're talking about Euston a lot. There's problems with Euston. Yeah, we know that. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. But if we go opportunity, benefits, fine, lovely. Actually, do they talk about the proper benefits? No. It's interesting that they just aren't talking about the actual environmental, no, construction, no, nothing about actual long-term capacity, no, none at all. Engagement, landed property, fine, whatever, forward look. Financial annex, this is the key stuff. So this is the target cost as it currently stands, is well within the estimated cost at this point. So actually we're down, so for phase one, the total estimated costs range is 35 to 45. The target cost is based on all the receipts put on the spike so far and the current risk pot and basically the latest, most accurate view of what the cost will be is 40.3. So kind of sat comfortably in the middle of that range, that allowable range. You've got the costs of 2A, 2B, the western leg. Note that the eastern leg gone and Goulburn Link gone. If you go down here, yes, because you can see the removal of the Goulburn Link. Yes, it did reduce the scope of the western leg. The other thing is, okay, historic forecast expenditure, fine, lots of stuff here, not that much of a problem. What's interesting is the phase 1 contingency drawdown. The drawdown of the HS2 contingency, a bit of drawdown, okay, fine. But there's been no drawdown of the government retained contingency. So actually what that means is since October 2020, so basically, and I dare say this is the case kind of further back than that, what's actually happening here is that there are no problems. Things are actually going fine. If this was spiraling, you'd expect these numbers to be dramatically increasing and just causing, they've only eaten into their overall contingency that's left by 30%. So they're 30% into the contingency, which is not that scary really, and they're not at all into the government contingency. So this is not a picture of a project in crisis. Euston has got its own screw-ups, but actually overall the project was being delivered and continues to be delivered for phase 1, although as you all know, I don't think you can call it HS2 anymore. It's kind of fine. It's going okay. So the idea of this picture of the project just going out of control is false, is really false, and we should reject it. So that's the report to Parliament. Let's get into the thing we're all here to talk about, which is about UK infrastructure projects, why they're so slow, why they're so costly, what's going on, what's the problem here. Let me just... I hear silence, which is good. I think my door is closed. I really hope it is. Anyway, I always feel very sealed when I have my earphones in. Earphones in rather than headphones, because I don't really know why, to be honest. So, let's talk about this. Why is this the case? Let's talk about my three reasons, and I'm not going to give you academic science behind each of these, but I'm going to back them up with a few different things. Let's go in and actually talk about the three reasons. The three reasons I gave in interviews why projects, but particularly why HS2 as cost has escalated. The number one reason is the lack of political commitment. We just have zero political ability to commit politically, and there are a few things within that as well. We have we are the most centralized, over-centralized, but certainly the most centralized economy in the world. The amount of power centralized on a very small number of people, as we saw with Sunak unilaterally cancelling the project, is hugely undemocratic. It means that this lack of political commitment means that the contractors will charge more because they don't know whether the project's going to be cancelled, so they need to make their money. That they can't business plan, so they need to get as much money up front as possible. This lack of political commitment just runs through everything. The next one, number two. So this lack of political commitment leads to the lack of a one thing that's critical, absolutely critically necessary. That thing is a long-term plan. Having a plan that you can actually build to, that contractors can go, oh, that's the plan, so we need to employ these people, we can buy this equipment, we can actually think about the future and reduce costs as a result of that. As a result of the lack of a long-term plan, certainly in HS2's case, you end up with massively overburdened scopes, and this is true with other projects as well. Transpennine Route Upgrade, classic example. Same with basically all of the electrification projects in the UK, that all fall under this because they're projects, not programs, of course. So number two is this overburdened scope. And what I mean by that, let's continue using HS2 as an example. Rather than, and I talked about this last week, didn't I? Rather than having a project that is Euston is its own project, because you have a long-term plan, you know that Euston needs to accommodate a certain number of trains, so you can do the Euston approaches and Euston as a single project. Then you do Old Oak Common as its own project. You know what's going to come into Old Oak Common, you know what's going to go out of Old Oak Common. You can build Old Oak Common as its own single project. It doesn't need to be part of a bigger program, you just build it as a single project. And then you can build the bits of rural high-speed line on their own. You can do these sections. Each section is its own thing. You don't need to call 520 kilometers of, whatever it is, 520 kilometers of railway, 530 in fact, You don't need to call 530 kilometres of railway one thing, one project, HS2. No. As a result of that, it becomes harder to cancel it. If you've got all the individual bits, it becomes, it's harder to cancel multiple projects. It becomes, the HS2 being called HS2 and isn't the issue, but the fact there is a nebulous scope that means that governments could say, well, we are delivering HS2 when they're not, is a real problem. So this overburdened scope. So and the reason this is when you compare costs in the UK. So that second one is absolutely accounts for an enormous difference, as I'll talk about momentarily, because if you're looking at high-speed lines on the continent, particularly Spain, France, Germany, they're not including new stations. They're not including the major city centre approaches. They're covering. They might well have tunnels for sure. Rural tunnels, absolutely. Lots of the Austrian and German, certainly the German high-speed lines have lots. Italian high-speed lines certainly have lots. No, we're talking about the fact that those, when you do repeat, can be very cheap. We're talking about the city centre stations that are immensely complicated. The approaches are immensely complicated. Those are all within the HS2 scope, whereas those are just not anywhere near the scope of high-speed lines. Look at France. In fact, we'll talk in a bit more detail about the French lines. To France, their high-speed lines are purely the high-speed line out in the rural area, joining up to the main line outside of the city. Very, very different. So, lots of people asking that. Do chuck a few. In fact, you know what? Let's go for the third one, and then I'll pause for questions. So, that's number one. Number two. Number three is the industry and delivery body structures. So what do I mean by that? What do I actually mean by this? First of all, what I mean by this is that I need to. Oh, where's my text spacing? Gone a bit weird. Strange. Anyway, never mind. I don't know what this space here is. It's a bit weird. Anyway, number three, industry and delivery body structure. So what do I mean by that? Well, two things. Firstly, our construction industry is massively fragmented, way more fragmented than other countries. We rely hugely heavily on SMEs, small and medium enterprises, very small businesses, to deliver stuff. We hire in everything. So we don't have a company that just has all the equipment, that has all the skills, that has all the surveyors. They have to hire in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 subcontractors, multiple layers of subcontractor. Each of those layers adds lawyers, adds contracts, adds cost, and adds delay. So that the industry structure is the fragmentation of the industry is an enormous extra cost burden on the project costs. But also the delivery body. We have a delivery body that has had to invent itself out of nowhere to just deliver HS2. The rest, because of the lack of a long-term plan, we don't have a delivery body that has been doing high-speed lines for 40 years. We don't have a delivery body that has been doing electrification for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So we haven't learned all the skills, all the knowledge that you pick up. This is particularly true for electrification, where there's a lot of discussion going, well, the cost of electrification is too much, so we can't do electrification. It's like, no. And a good example, and Gary particularly points this out, is the amount of paperwork, the amount of documentation required for any given kilometre of electrification. It's like, well, there is that happening, and the costs associated with that happening aren't the reason why we're not doing electrification. The fact we're not doing electrification and haven't had a rolling program of electrification means we've forgotten how much of that we don't need. And it's true for everything to do with the design, but also the construction as well. Having the skilled people, the equipment that you can accelerate the delivery of this stuff with. So these are the three: lack of political commitment, overburdened scope, and the industry and delivery body structure. So the kind of the organisations that enable you to deliver, build, design, develop, scope the project. These are the fundamental issues. So I'm going to go big face, and we're going to quickly whiz through and answer some questions. Let's have a look. I'm slouching here. I hope. I'm just going to quickly look at my phone just while I'm doing that. Yes, this looks like good news, which is good. Right. Oh golly, I'm being quoted. I've got Google notifications of my name. I don't need to Google my name because I have asked Google to tell me when I appear. It's useful if you pop up in the news and you kind of want to know where you are so that you don't get shouted at too much by your employer. Right, so where are we? Let's hop up here. Oh, let's go down. There's lots of comments going on. Right. Yeah, Richard Fraser, quote the cost on day one, and 15 years later it costs more, always does. It's called creeping confounding inflation. Exactly, as we showed in the table there. Gareth is saying, a comptroller is a posh title for an auditor for government spending in certain areas. I think it's more agencies than directly run services. Interesting, that's very useful. Raphael, right, actually still need to watch the episode. Yes, you do. Tom, that one could be fixed by having a rolling program of high-speed rail. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very true. Right, so... let's see what else. Our percentage increases compared to the 2013 budget. No, the percentage increases are off the August 2023 budget. Good question, Gareth. 116 billion is still not bad at all. Yep. 30 billion figure. I think the 30 billion figure was like possibly a number quoted by Network Rail in its New Lines program report. I think that's where that came from. I can't exactly remember. Yeah, some people saying it was costed 16 billion. Yeah, it's just a joke. It's just nonsense. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, fine. Sakura is saying, so regarding scope, you'd want HS2 London from HS3 to HS4. I mean, not so much that. I would just say you have a picture of what the final rail network should look like, and you divvy it up and deliver bits of it. I wouldn't be numbering the projects particularly, but yeah, you could. When we go through what the UK's high speed rail network should actually look like, which will be an upcoming episode, doing that will, that'll be the we could discuss what numbering might be off the back of that, can't we? Right. Why is it that this happens? Well, funnily enough, we're going to have a look at why this happens, Raphael. So everyone asking questions, continue to at my name if you want to ask questions. So let's talk about this. We're going to talk about this document here, which interestingly is authored, among others, by a certain Sir John Armitt. It all comes back. There's a PwC report. The bad guys, or some of the bad guys, we hate the big four. They're baddies. But this is actually a useful document. It makes some key omissions, but nevertheless, it's a useful document. This was happening kind of during the development of HS2 Phase 2. In November 2016, and government was like, why is it costing so much? As they often ask, and often commission reports. And so High-Speed Rail International Benchmarking Study is the name of this report, and what it does is, well, we're going to get it up for stars, because here it is. Look, I've brought it up. It's a document that goes through, picked a load of comparator projects and tried to understand why they cost less than the projects in the UK. So there's a big forward, whatever, we don't care. We're going to jump through the executive summary as well because we don't care. What we're going to do is have a look at the project, at this report. It's not a huge document. We're going to kind of whiz through fairly quickly. So going to look at the cost of international high-speed rail. It's going to look at Phase 2 itself. We're not going to dwell on that. And then we're going to look at comparators with international high-speed rail, and then some findings. All the prices are quoted in 2011 values in here, by the way, just in case that's relevant or useful. I always have to think about what year. It's the first thing to do is what year is that price in? It's really important. So the study reviewed £230 billion of high-speed rail projects across multiple thousands of kilometres of railway in 12 countries. Marvellous. 32 projects, so that's the comparison there. Fine, lovely. And here's a nice summary of all the different projects they looked at. Lovely. So let's look at the costs. So the average cost of high-speed rail comparators in 2011 prices is 32 million per route kilometre. It's not per single track kilometre, per route kilometre. So it's about half that, 16 per single track kilometre, I dare say. But the range is kind of 11 to 79 million per route kilometre. That's kind of the comparison. And so you see there's a range of costs here. I know this is quite small. Don't worry about the size of the text. And this is for those watching on your phone. Anyway, right. So you've got different comparators of cost for like rural areas, urban and high density, kind of high infrastructure density comparators, and then complex asset comparators, so things like tunnels and stuff. So you've got kind of different comparisons here. It's a good document. It's well worth picking in and having a look at. You can see the range for tunnels, viaducts, earthworks, fine, whatever. What's annoying is that they don't plot HS2 on all of these. I found that irritating in this report, but anyway. And then ancillary costs, so things like project management, design, insurance, that sort of thing. And again, you've got the different comparators. You can sort of see how these different, the range that these different comparators map. And the kind of the comparators are lettered. In fact, have they lettered the? They haven't actually lettered. Annoyingly, they've not lettered them, so we know kind of who is who. But anyway, we've only got 20 projects that we can sort of directly compare in any case. So phase 2, well, we know what phase 2 used to look like. In fact, just to date this document, they've still got Meadowhall, so that they've got what should have been called the South Yorkshire hub. But anyway, Sheffield, Meadowhall Station, then Leeds. There it is. Fine. That's the phase 2 bit, so they're just kind of explaining that. And I don't know whether possibly an outcome, once again, should John Armitt screwing things up, I don't know whether part of this document may have directly influenced the decision to create, to put the train into Sheffield, which by people who don't understand why our railway network doesn't work quite the same way as European railway networks do. But anyway, so there's cost and schedule estimates, fine. So that's not hugely exciting, just explaining why HS2 phase 2 is. Now let's look at the comparisons. So the cost drivers, they're different challenges. HS2 phase 2 faces some different challenges to those faced by other international high-speed railways, which drives greater costs that are difficult to avoid without changing some of the fundamental objectives of the scheme. However, there are some differences in the approaches taken to delivering high-speed rail schemes by overseas comparators that do present opportunities. So differences, explainable differences, so summary of differences and opportunities. For each of the drivers set out in the figure above, so there's these 5 drivers of cost they've looked at. So driver 1 is strategic objectives. Driver 2 is the UK infrastructure context and sponsor requirements. Driver 3, delivery model in the UK industry. So this is kind of feeding directly into one of my big bullet points. Driver 4, design requirements and assets. Driver 5, scope and estimate development processes. We're really bad at estimating projects in the UK. Again, that's very much fundamentally a structural issue. So now this graphic, I'm going to refer to this back to this within my slide deck. We're going to pick through so we'll go back to those numbers that shortly. So there's kind of cost differences. So there's a couple of high-speed lines that are similar. So similar alignment speeds, 400 km/h alignment, and maximum operating speed 360. Extensive environmental mitigations, tunnel sections into city centres, dedicated intermediate stations, extensive use of elevated sections. So there's this one project is what they've used for this graphic here. Comparator F, as they call it. I don't know which project comparator F is, but it gives an idea of where kind of the key differences are. But there are other. It's a shame that they just picked on that one rather than others and pulled things out. This wasn't a fantastic document, in honesty. It's useful. There's useful stuff here, but there's definite shortcomings in the way they've done the split up, and I think they've lost some stuff, and there's some fundamental missing gaps in what they've said as well, which I'll pick up on in my slide deck. Anyway, let's whiz through. So what they got, the strategic objectives, new station, which requires new stations to be provided. So they're talking a little bit about scope, not in a huge way, but they're talking about the fact that new stations, fine. There's kind of waffle. They go through all the different things here. So then they kind of very roughly outlines where these differences are, fine. So they go into the details in a bit more in this section, differences and opportunities. So talk about kind of strategic objectives and why the fact that why the project's designed the way it is, and the high capacity, so on and so forth. Yeah. Fine. So. And lots of this stuff that fits delivery dates and is a problem. There's bits and pieces they pick up on. They talk about UK population density, but not dramatically different necessarily. Some sort of comparisons here. There's comparisons of rail density. The UK has a very dense rail network relative to the other high-speed rail comparator countries, but we don't have a particularly. Our road network isn't dramatically more dense than the rest. We're middling in those 5 countries, France, Germany, UK, Italy, and Spain. There's another interesting graphic which looks at the route characteristics of HS2 phase 2, not the other phase, but phase 2, compared to other projects. So comparator F is sort of nominally similar, although there's less tunnelling on it. More structures. You sort of see a comparison. It's annoying that they've chosen to just not state what the projects are, because it makes our lives a little bit difficult. City centre dedicated lines. It talks about why we need new stations or massive extra bits of station on HS2, which is a fundamental thing we have to do that you just could not avoid if you want to do the right thing, which is why Sheffield was such a mistake. And I give some examples again. I pulled these out into my slide deck. Scheduling and phasing, okay, fine. So that's weirdly done. Speed, maximum speeds. Could we reduce the speeds? Well, they don't talk about why the speed is what it is and what that unlocks, which again is frustrating. But they talk about comparative speeds, and the reality is that HS2, which is in here, is below the average comparative speed. So actually, there's not a dramatic difference. As people always say, it's a crazy speed, but it's actually there's a HS1. Wait, what? HS1 overall, yeah, that's HS1 that's below average. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's me misreading this. HS2, annoyingly, they haven't included on here. The average comparative speed is 311. Have they given an HS2 average speed? It's probably the average speed for HS2 is probably like 310-ish, probably. It's probably about there. I just don't see it as being dramatically different. Is HS2 phase 2 on here? It isn't, which is, again, why have they done that? It's just like a basic data thing. Put HS2 on here. Like, what are they doing? Anyway, there's some bad choices made in this document. I would have had some comments had I been reviewing it. Okay, so there's lots of stuff on the UK industry. There's stuff about planning. There's stuff about, and again, I'll pick out some of these. Lots of information here. I'm just reviewing this so you can pick the document up yourself. You can download this. You just Google it and find it. It's still out there. Very much planning for high-speed rail. Having a plan. Look, France have had this strategic plan since like 1992 or something. Germany has one that they've had codified for a long time. Integration, relative, fine. Supply chain costs, yeah, the UK supply chain is, yeah. Well, again, I'll pick some of these things out. There's this thing which is interesting about the UK industry environment driving higher supply chain costs. So low market confidence. Oh, now where's low market confidence? Lack of government commitment. Fragmented supply chain. Lower spending on people and skills, lower investment in innovation, less capital deepening. All of this stuff, all the stuff I've just talked about, my three big things, all feed into us having our construction industry being particularly inefficient. It's a good graphic, this one. It's a useful one to refer back to. Fine. So the design requirements, fine. So there's stuff about the fact that, well, we use this and we use that. We use existing rolling stock depot facilities and upgrade them. We don't have room for that. All these sorts of comments and stuff. So let's see. Fine. There's some useful and interesting commentary here. Comparison of rolling stock depot costs. Our depots are more expensive. Noise barriers and stuff like that. There's lots of comments on scope. Tunnel diameter, HS2 phase 2, Spain, California, we all have the same tunnel diameter, so that's not the issue. Track widths, HS2 phase 2 is middling. It's got a narrower track width than Taiwan and Germany and Belgium. It's again not, it's lots of fuss on costs. This is the other stuff that I'm saying is gold plating. You go through here and it's clear that this doesn't account for much difference in costs. So finance recommendations, fine. They say a bunch of stuff that's like about fine. You know what? We don't care about the recommendations. That's the end of that document. Let's pick through the key things here. So this is one of the key findings of the document. There we go. I'm going to read this out verbatim. High-speed rail projects in mainland Europe are typically part of a long-term strategy that has often been set out for decades. This has enabled the promoter organisations to develop expertise and to provide the supply chain with longer-term incentives to invest in growth and innovation. This is a thing we lack. A long-term strategy. What is it that I keep going on about all the time? Oh, yes, that's right. The need for one of those. So that's long-term strategy. And what does that enable? Well, among other things, and also there are partly historic infrastructure reasons for this, but among other things, let's look at a couple of LGVs. So Sud-Est Atlantique and Bretagne Pas de la Loire. My French is dreadful, sorry everyone. This is pointing out that we've got, so let's look at LGV BPL. René, Laurent, Le Mans, all here. This is the junction to Classic Network. So there is a junction onto the Classic Network for it to arrive into the main station. There is a junction, there's a bypass, and then junctions to get into the main station of Val. There are junctions into the main line to get in and out of Le Mans here, and junctions connected onto another high-speed line and onto the other kind of existing network. You can see this is just a high-speed spine. There's nothing going into city centres. ditto. Let's look at Sud-Est Atlantique, Bordeaux up to Tours. You can see Poitiers, all of these cities along here. There we go. Châtellerault, Rolt, Poitiers, and Angoulême. My French is so dreadful. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. All of our francophones out there, I do apologise. Again, you'll notice no city centre station, just connections onto the existing network as it bypasses the city centre station. There we are. Bypass. None of these, and this is true for Spain, this is true for Italy. The high-speed bit does not go into the city centre. Now, this isn't me saying that that's what we should be doing. We don't have the capacity. The whole point is that Beeching got rid of our city centre capacity, and if it existed at all in the first place. We don't have that city centre capacity. We don't have the capacity. Our city centre stations are already too small, so we don't have the capacity to run a load of extra services through them. So we need the new city centre stations or the massive expansions. That's just and this is a very few other high-speed lines in the world have to do that. So it's very, very silly to make international comparisons without accounting for that, attempting to account for that. And yes, as many people have pointed out, Phase 2A is a much fairer comparison with other high-speed lines because it doesn't include anything other than a couple of high-speed rail junctions and some plain line. Actually, it's still disproportionately expensive because it's such a short stretch, 16 miles. The cost of those big high-speed rail junctions and the cost of some of the big stuff doesn't get evened out enough because it's such a short stretch. So even that's not a hugely fair comparison. But the cost of HS2 Phase 2A is much more comparable with the high-speed network. So, and what else? Okay, so the construction industry. Let's talk about the construction industry. There's kind of 4 bullet points that are worth picking into. Number 1. There's evidence that the UK uses a greater number of smaller contract packages than international comparators, which increases administration and interface burdens and reduces economies of scale. Public sector procurement in the UK has a greater emphasis than elsewhere on encouraging SMEs, small to medium enterprises. Yes, it does. Why do we do this? Because, in Sunak's words, Britain is the country of small businesses. UK contractors is number 2. UK contractors do not have the same levels of confidence in the pipeline of work to commit to the same levels of investment in skills, innovation and plan, or to consolidate as much as mainland European contractors do. Yes. Again, the reason for this, lack of any commitment from government. Number 3. I should have been scribbling, sorry, we've done number 2. Number 3. Mainland European contractors employ higher proportions of labour directly than is typical in the UK. Oh, look, rentier economy stuff. Where transient contract labour is more common, resulting in the additional burden associated with an unfamiliar workforce. You have to do much more job-specific training. And number 4. John Christoph is asking a question I was going to raise momentarily. Number 4. Construction contractors in the US, France and Germany invest more in plant and equipment than contractors in the UK. So there's just a lack. Our contractors are worse equipped. They have fewer skilled staff on the books. They don't have any confidence in the long-term pipeline. And we also have more of them, and they're all fragmented and rely on lots of subcontractors as well. I'm going to go big face and answer a couple of questions. John Christoph, couldn't one argue that these city centre stations... so the stations... It's not so much that the stations are outside the city limits, John Christoph. It's more that... there aren't any stations on those 2 LGVs, that they actually the trains come off the high speed line, run onto the existing network to run into the city centre, then they come back out onto the high speed line the other side, and that is one way to do it. It works if you've got city centre stations with enough capacity. So in some cases in the US it would work better than. The trouble in the UK is we don't have city centre stations with any capacity. We also don't have, crucially, we don't have any city centre. The city centre approaches into places like Manchester, even in Crewe, particularly Leeds. Certainly the case in Birmingham. We don't have the approach capacity to run the high speed services into the city centre station either. So that's a key issue. That's it. That's kind of the point I was making, John Christoph. It's not so much that there's parkway stations. The HS2 had a couple of parkway stations, and there are reasons for having the parkway stations. in the East Midlands and in South Yorkshire, particularly because those are the two Parkway stations. Okay, Birmingham International and Manchester Airport are both airport stations that kind of have a similar function in serving large bits of those cities that are developing differently. Like again, West Midlands, there's Coventry and other places could use Birmingham Interchange, and similar for. But anyway, the point of East Midlands Parkway was not East Midlands Parkway. That was East Midlands Hub, was that it's a very spread population across the several cities and large towns in the East Midlands, and so having a hub station allowed those to be catered for without compromising the city centre stations and the overall route. And you could build a metro system to kind of metrofy the existing rail network to then tie. Improve your overall generalised journey times. And the issue of South Yorkshire is again similar. You've got Rotherham, Sheffield, Doncaster, quite a broad spread. The geography through Sheffield itself is very challenging, so having Meadowhall made more sense as a station because you actually widen the catchment substantially, bringing in a lot of the kind of the wider, broader area that is otherwise underserved. And again, it's straight off the M1, so it's a valuable connection. So that's the reason for those Parkway stations. But other than that, they were all city centre stations on HS2. So that's kind of hence the reasoning that I'm going through now. Eddie Owen, this might seem irrelevant, but how was the UK's motorway network built? Was it done by rolling programming? Can lessons be learnt? Eddie, yes, you have referenced my trash feature comments and things I've said elsewhere as well. The motorway network was delivered to a plan, a broad plan. Okay, it was a bouncy plan, but it nevertheless was a strategic plan, so they could build bits of it, and it kind of the bits they chose to construct. It was also built not by central government, but the delivery was led by the majority of our motorways. The delivery was led by the regional road units, by basically the councils, large councils, back when the councils were powerful, the ones who delivered it, not central government. That's a really key thing. And in fact, since central government took it all over, we haven't really delivered much motorway at all, and when we have, it's been very expensive. The motorway network was built to a strategic plan by the regions, and this very much ties into the stuff that I say about, I talked about over-centralisation. This is a key thing. It's more difficult to get buy-in when you're talking about general elections and electional election cycle politics and electioneering rather than centralising everything and rather than spinning out to the devolved regions, whatever they happen to be, whether it's the combined authorities or whether it's a proper devolved structure that makes sense rather than 20 different types of devolved authority, none of which actually make any sense. But yeah, if you devolve it out to the councils, big councils, groups of councils, coalitions of councils can deliver this stuff, and they can get the political buy-in on a longer term basis than central government ever can, because central government is fickle and stupid in the UK. And basically absolutely unfit for purpose. So, right, let's have the discussion. Let's crack on a bit more. Let's get my small face up. What's the next thing we're going to talk about? Yes, this thing. The summary of cost differences between HS2 Phase 2 and comparator F. So this is just one comparator project. So don't take too much from the big numbers, but this gives you on this side here are the differences in cost between HS2 Phase 2 and that particular comparator project and where those costs come from. So in terms of the difference of like strategic objectives and how much more HS2 has to do than other schemes, because of the way we've kind of expanded or not expanded our rail network in the intervening years since it was built, that we have to do more things, but it only accounts for 7%. That's not a huge difference. Double that, 15%, is the cost differences attributable to actually let me rephrase that, right? So cost differences attributable to the strategic objectives, so the need for intermediate stations, fine, but the route costs, city centre, dedicated high-speed lines and terminal stations, all that extra scope, in this case they're saying it's adding 15%. I think that's to this comparator F, which is supposedly a similar project that has similar things. I think that's not hugely useful. If you compare it to all of them, that number would go up because they're comparing. Comparator F is supposedly very similar in scope to Phase 2A, but but if you compare it to all of them, which is what most people are doing when they're quoting like, oh, it's 10 times more expensive than other high-speed lines, this number obviously goes up a lot because those high-speed lines, those projects, the headline costs that are then divided by the route length don't include all the expensive stuff. So let's jump to the comparator F difference to the delivery model and the UK construction industry. They perceive this as about 12%. So it's a sizable chunk of cost difference. And actually the suggestion is from the PwC say, well, you could get all that back if you just restructured the supply chain. Well, you could, but you'd have to do a long-term plan, which would mean abolishing the Treasury. So... and there's another section here, design requirements and assets. So this is referring to some of the stuff that you might refer to as gold plating, which I hate as a phrase, is 5%. So trivial and probably arguable, because there are lots of reasons why we might have done some of the things that we've got here, asset costs, civil structures, railway systems. The fact that we buried all of HS2 3 metres up, certainly phase 1, we buried the whole lot about 3 metres below ground level to avoid it pissing anyone off, which is going to be really nice for everyone travelling on it. That sort of thing adds quite a bit of cost, but actually still overall, for comparator F, certainly it was negligible, and I agree that it's negligible. Barry Jones is saying the regional road construction units reported to MOT. Yeah, but but Barry, that they were regional units. They were informed. The councils. Their relationship was with the councils. The council design units are the ones who did the design. These were, the motorways were delivered regionally. They were not delivered centrally. It's like their official reporting line, perhaps, but these were, it was the councils. It was regionally, absolutely, it was regionally delivered. The design software was developed by, that's still to this related to the software that I used to design railways, MOS. I use BRT, but it incorporates elements of MX, which was the result of MOS, was developed by County Durham and North Yorkshire councils, I think. Anyway, so and then there's this other bit here, scope and estimate development process, which is basically saying the UK is dog shit at actually developing scopes effectively, which is fine, but they don't say we can fix that. They just say, which is funny because that's the bit that they're most, as an auditor, that's the bit you'd think they might have more to say on. But anyway, key thing missing from that report, I know we've gone a bit long. This is not going to be a super long one, I promise. The key thing missing from that report is there's no mention of the problems of over-centralisation and the value of devolution, and there's no mention of the ability of central government to meddle. So there's no mention of the dynamics of power within the UK. It's a serious omission, frankly, within that document. Nevertheless, useful, interesting document. Lots of shortcomings of the document, but it's useful to pick up, and there's information within there. So we've got these three: the lack of political commitment, overburdened scope, and the industry and delivery body structure. These are the three things that account for those high costs. As for gold plating, which I hear a lot, no. So, interestingly, there's before we end, there's actually we're not going to end because we're going to go through that blog and talk about it for 10 minutes. But back in December 2010, this is not a new thing. None of this is new. Anyone remember Infrastructure UK? Lol. Anyway, December 2010, Treasury created a document going, why does everything cost so much? Within this, and I referenced this in Trash Future, which I will tease later on, they had 5 improvement objectives, which you'll laugh about. This is Treasury, the bad guys of the piece. So let's start from the top. To create better visibility and continuity of the infrastructure investment pipeline. It's Treasury saying that. And number 2, to implement effective governance of projects and programmes. Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Number 3, to instill greater discipline in the commissioning of projects and programmes. Wait a minute, didn't Sunak just cancel HS2 and replace it with a bunch of projects that he'd got his SPAD to make up or Google, and that's the basis on which the Network North list came from? Okay, whatever. Develop smarter ways to use competition. That's just a Treasury brain nonsense. That doesn't mean anything. We don't even worry about that. And then the last one, number 5, to create an environment that encourages industry to invest in efficiency and reducing direct construction costs. So the long-term pipeline thing, this one. So this is Treasury. I mean, there's a deep irony here in the fact that this is a document that Treasury created, and Treasury is one of the key reasons why none of that ever happens. That's quite funny to me. In any case, so this has been coming up for a long time, and the cost is not the problem, and the fact that the issue is far deeper than that. It's that all of our institutions in the UK are set up specifically set up to avoid delivering anything. Like, I'm not being trite about that point. It's a very specific point. Like, our entire institutional framework, the attitudes of government, the attitudes of bodies within government, the attitudes of private contractors delivering for those bodies, for government, is work out how to deliver nothing. That's the ultimate aim, is, right, how can we make nothing the answer here? That's fundamentally across all this, that's the answer, is, right, the ideal solution is nothing, rather than the ideal solution is maximum and work your way back. Anyway, let's go over to Sam and Ben's little blog. Let's go over there. No thanks. Let's go through. So they've gone through unachievable, talking about this. This was written back in August 2023, so before the big cancellations and so on. So lots of stuff about costs. We're not going to worry about the costs thing. Let's talk about the 400 million per mile. We've already said that's, it's just not, it's not an effective comparison. It's just a mismanagement project. It wasn't tragic, too buried, yeah, whatever, okay, fine. Much about how HS2's project grew so large. It's not that large. Again, we don't, yeah, it's still, it's not, no, fine. So there's lots of stuff there that's not, Britain Remade, the pro-growth campaign group. I don't know who Britain Remade are, and I'm wary of them. I don't know who their funders are. Anyone who knows who Britain Remade are, always be skeptical of these sorts of groups until you know who they are. They looked across 138 tram, metro, and rail projects across 14 countries, and some road projects. We're going to ignore the road projects. The reality is that infrastructure is more expensive to build in the UK. Okay, yeah, fine. They've adjusted to 2023 figures as well, so that's fine. Okay, that's the reality, but the problem is where they leap to why we're not delivering stuff. So they're talking about trams, and okay, great, we deliver lots of trams. Lots of places, Lincoln, Winchester, Carlisle, all having tram systems, which, they should. Anyway, infamously, Leeds, largest city in Western Europe without metro system. Yeah, we all know this stuff. Fine. How has France been able to have a tram renaissance, and why can't Britain do the same? Leeds super tram, it's saying it's much cheaper, and it's saying look at these tram construction costs. France super cheap, UK look really very expensive. Like, well, is that? No, okay. What about what we've built? Fine. So talking about these things that we've built. Fine. Some project. I'm not. I need to look into these prices, but anyway, whatever. It's kind of similar to a database that I have of projects that I've picked out. So they've gone through it. Look at this. It's expensive. Going through costs of underground costs, and one of the things, there's a thing they've written that irritated me. Where is it? Let's go into tubes. Yeah, okay. So at peak times, busiest Elizabeth Line. They talk about the fact that Crossrail cost more. World's most expensive metro systems. Yeah, that's because it's has one of the highest capacities of any metro system. It's the long trains. It's high capacity. It's built for growth into the future. They're saying, the Northern Line extension to Battersea was less expensive, but wasn't cheap for that much for 2 miles of track. Yeah, that's because for a short project, it's much more expensive per kilometre. So that's kind of how that works. New York in the US, by far the world's most expensive place to build. Yeah, and then you go down to the UK, and it's like, well, it's not that. It's okay. It's expensive, but it's not so dramatically expensive by comparison to others. Double the cost perhaps, but actually I'd say it's less than that. It's more like 40, 50. Yeah, okay. Well, we call it double, around double, which they've said here. And 6 times more expensive than Spain. Okay, fine. They kind of go through and they discuss the same thing. This is where their conclusion is, it's because we build expensively that we don't do anything. And I cannot tell you how much that's upside down. If Britain could build as cheaply as Spain and the Nordics, we'd be able to do a much wider range of transport. No, it's the fact that we don't build all the stuff is the reason we, it's not like we've been delivering this stuff and suddenly it got expensive when we stopped delivering it. We have never done this stuff. The UK has never built metro systems outside of London since the initiation of we just haven't done it. BR did a little bit, again thanks to substantial devolution of power, a little bit in Merseyrail has some elements of metrification that happened, but it's not it's not that dramatic. Again, referencing Alan here, as I have before, but this obsession with cost and saying cost is the reason, just absolutely is politically, it's just losing all of the context as to why that might be why is that the case? Why is the cost high? It's like, it's not just because people have decided, it's not that our engineers like just doing more. No, it isn't. If you look at the system in the UK that has, you look at Crossrail and compare it to a metro system elsewhere, it's not, okay, it's good, it's fantastic, but it's just a regular ass metro system. The engineers haven't gone out of their way to make it more expensive. There are reasons, structural reasons why it has reached that cost. It's not the physical stuff. It's not that we've literally gold plated it. There are structural reasons why those costs are higher. And there's just there's absolutely no consideration as to why that might be. And then it gets worse when we go down to rail electrification. So Ben and Sam here talking about, or Sam and Ben here talking about electrification, and we're such, it costs so much of our to too few lines electrified. Yeah, fine, whatever. Electrification should be no brainer, but look, it's so expensive, so we don't do it. Electrification of the Great Western Line from London to Swansea, budget expanded threefold. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? They're referring to RIA's electrification cost challenge document here, which is a great document. I think we've referred to it in past rail narratives several times before. They estimate things could be cheaper, yeah, for sure. But they pick up Transpennine route upgrade as an example of a project, and they say, well, it's supposed to cost this much, and now it costs a huge amount more, 9 to 11 billion. It's because, it's because we've not done anything to our infrastructure. We haven't upgraded our infrastructure, so the electrification makes no sense to be done until you've done the capacity upgrade. It's not that the electrification is expensive, it's that we've not done anything, so it all gets pulled into, once again, a great example of overburdened scope, because we've not done anything before. HS2 could have been lower scope, could have been less substantial in scope if we'd built other higher speed bypasses or station expansion projects at any point in the past. But all we've ever done, the most dramatic stuff we've ever done was, apart from the Selby diversion, is like just remodeling of station approaches. And that's it. We've never done any real, outside of London, certainly, has there been anything approaching a major station reconstruction that's expanded beyond the railway boundary? No. So, again, just hopelessly missing the point here, very, very dramatically. I'm going to ignore the stuff about roads. So, the more expensive infrastructure to build, the less of it we can afford. Well, that's a truism, but it's not a political reality. Brilliants are less productive as a direct result. Well, that's that's a secondary point, and it's true, certainly. And also, outside of Britain, bigger cities tend to be more productive. Yeah, fine. You're just saying stuff that's true, but it's irrelevant. One explanation for why Britain's big cities underperform is they're only big on paper. Again, you're quoting Tom Forth's stuff, fine. But new tram lines could cheap. If they were as cheap to construct as they were in Europe, then they'd be a lot more likely to actually get built. How have you come to that conclusion? You haven't. You're looking at correlation, not causation. Sorry, boys. Big to this. Just very, very fundamentally missing the big picture here. Absolutely nothing to be said about about where power sits. Nothing to be said about centralisation. Nothing to be said about treasury. Nothing to be said about Green Book. You've missed the mark on this one, lads. Sorry. Right, so that's me getting angry about this, but I hopefully just made the key point. So this is the kind of the point I want to end on, and we've talked about loads of other stuff and hopefully covered it all in reasonable detail. But this is the kind of the deep fundamental point here, which is the entire UK economy is built on rentier extraction. So what I mean by that is the whole thing is based on us not owning anything and us having to hire a thing from a guy who in turn hires a thing from a guy who in turn hires a thing from a guy who hires a thing from a guy. And the logic is, neoliberal logic is that all the money is made not by delivering the physical thing, but by all of the layers of rentier extraction from the person going, can I have a thing? Between the person going, can I have a thing? And the physical thing being delivered. The money is made by, in theory, made by all the extractive pointless stuff happening in the interfaces between those various people. That is where the money is supposedly made, right? Except that obviously, so right, okay, put to one side whether that's true or not. Fundamentally, if that's the case, then it's so, why are we surprised if our entire economy is based on that? why are we surprised that everything takes longer and costs more? Like, our entire system is set up to not deliver anything and to maximize the cost of not delivering anything by extracting as much money as you can in all those interfaces. Of course, our economy being absolutely wired like that, of course we can't deliver anything, and of course it costs a lot to deliver nothing. Like, fundamentally, structurally, neoliberal economics is designed around making money from not doing the thing, but from the process by which you get towards delivering the thing. And the more things you can insert between reality being delivered and reality being asked for, the more things you can insert between it, in theory, the more money you can make and the bigger the economy grows. Except we know that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work long term. That's the perfect reason. It's why the railways were fragmented in the way they were, because the Adam Smith Institute and Treasury at the time, who wrote the white paper that led, which I've got a copy behind me, which led to privatisation, that white paper that led to privatisation, the form of privatisation was all about create as many interfaces between as many different organisations as possible, because that's where we will make money, that's where we'll extract value. Except we know that it doesn't work because there is a reality. And if you want to deliver that physical reality, actually all those boundaries just get in the way of delivering the thing. So yeah, this is my last point, is that to write, so sorry Ben and Sam, but for you to write your little report about costs and ignore this point, and ignore the fundamental reason why the US, and generally this is true for all the Anglosphere countries, all of us follow the same sort of post-70s neoliberal idea of what how best extractive capitalism, how best to run an economy and make money and employ people. All of them have these problems of high project costs, and for no one, or for Alan and for Ben and Sam to have not attempted to unpick that, really misses a fundamental reason as to why these costs are so high. So without unwiring that, without getting rid of a lot of outsourcing, restructuring a lot. I didn't catch myself there because I think we should have some outsourcing. I was just like, there might well be some elements of outsourcing that don't make much difference, is more the point. But without kind of reducing those interfaces, simplifying the structure of our construction industry, having a long-term plan, without doing that, then we're not going to fix the cost problem, and we'll keep having wonks going, well, the reason we don't build anything is because it costs too much. We'll keep having these discussions, as we have been for a century already. We'll keep having these discussions until Britain is empty because everyone's buggered off somewhere that actually functions. Yes. Anyway, there we go. So I'm going to get rid of my face. Hopefully that is makes some sense and is a valuable explanation. So I'm going to now switch off my cursor capture because I can't. Everyone, thanks for listening. I think the previous version of the podcast, last week's podcast, is up and downloadable. I now have access to the Spotify, so I can actually look at the stats, which is quite good. We need to. So Green Signals is the new podcast that Nigel and Richard have created. Nigel Harris and Richard Boker have created, and obviously, as with podcast, has the support of like an actual production company and an advertising budget, and so that's fine. But they're obviously going to beat us. So what we need to happen is for all of you to listen to this podcast as much as possible somehow, so we can jump up in the Spotify and Apple stats, so that we're the most listened to railway and politics podcast. Come on now, folks, we can do it. Anyway, yes. So the usual plugs: patreon.com/Gareth Dennis to subscribe. We're aiming for 200 subscribers by the end of the year, weren't we? GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. Gareth, thank you for getting a lot of extra people to buy. I will do some questions at the end, by the way. Gareth, thanks for getting more people to buy the Llanfair PG hoodies. I might change the design on those to get rid of the text that I've cut off. I thought it was a funny gimmick to have that, but actually, I might just have the. Anyway, I'm not going to do it anytime soon. And I still think, Gareth, if you like it, then it's good enough for them, and if you like it, it's good enough for me as well. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for abuse and loose change. I've not been in there for a while. I wonder if anyone's sent me any abuse. I need to go in and check. GarethDennis.co.uk /Discord for the chat that's going on in the corner. please, if you don't already, subscribe, because we need to hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Come on now, we're getting close. I don't. In fact, what is the number? Let's go in. Let's go to YouTube. What are the subscriber numbers to the channel right now? Number of subscribers. I actually don't know how to find that out. 9.04k. So we only need. What is that? Like what? 90? No. We need another. Is that 900 people to subscribe? Is that how that? I can't, no, 9. No. So that's 99040 minus 10. We need. No. Go. There we go. 960 people. We need 960 more people to subscribe for us to hit the 10,000 mark. Come on, make the magic happen. Let's do this. Please, subscribe so that we can bump the numbers, because I don't know what happens at 10k, but you know, maybe I get a nice email. I know I don't get a plaque. Anyway, right, enough of that. Some plugs. Yes, Trash Feature, High Speed 2 Cruise Control. Go listen to Trash Feature that I was on. It's a free one. It's the free one. You can go and listen to that, where I kind of talk about HS2 a bit more and cover some of this stuff from this week, some of the stuff from last week. Go and do that. Also, as of today, Well, There's Your Problem podcast with Scooter and me talking about the Interocean Corridor, Corridor Interoceanico. Oh, my Mexican Spanish is bad. Episode 143. It's a 3-hour bumper episode, and we talk about, among other things, why running HS2s among FRA rolling stock like the one you can see on the screen right now is a very, very bad idea, and it's going to flatten people. This isn't good. So some multiple plugs for you there of things that I'm popping up on. Episode 189, What the Heck Else Has Been Happening, is next week. It's a news episode. There's a picture of no one listening to Mark Harper's speech, which is good because he said a load of tinfoil hat nonsense. Loads of news stuff has been happening in the transport world. I realise in the bigger world, lots of horrible news stuff is happening that I've been having a sob about every half a day. Absolutely horrific. Very upsetting. But we're going to focus on transport news, and it's not all good. Funnily enough, there is some good stuff in there, though, so we will talk about the good stuff. If you've got news you want to send me that needs to go in there, then do so. Do send me some of that news. Oh, that's next week, episode 189. My goodness, right. Oh, what's the chat going on here? Yeah, do like, always like the episodes so I can see what's going on. Regression, kind of re-upping my question from last week. How have EU countries built and managed a different organisational structure, political economy and state role in construction? Oof. They didn't necessarily make the decision to change their economy to be focused around services and finance in the way that was the decision. Riley talks wonderfully about this off Trash Feature. A decision was made economically within government in the kind of the aftermath of the oil the kind of the two oil crises in the 1970s, that London would start being a place to send money through. Riley explains it fantastically and has done in a couple of episodes where he explains the reason Britain became the way it did compared to other European countries. That hasn't happened in other European countries. They didn't make this decision to be where the money based on oil and other sort of commodities would pass through the UK, and we would base our entire economy on that money just transiting its way through the UK. That was what we would base our economy on. And that's why everything's broken, because it's based around facilitating that at scale. There are other details to it, but other countries just didn't go through that, so they're still able to deliver physical stuff. They still have a manufacturing industry. They can still build roads and railways. We cannot do this. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Michael C. Hello, Michael. Lovely to see you here. Do you also think the HS2 scope could have been reduced with trains running into existing stations if we'd invested in more suburban capacity in the form of Crossrail RER style lines? Yes, exactly. If we'd had more, if we'd sent more of our suburban lines underneath the city centre stations, like has happened across mainland Europe, then we would have had the capacity for more high-speed trains to use the existing network. That's absolutely true. But we can partly the lack of investment and partly beaching is guilty of that, because if we'd retained some of the suburban networks in some of the cities that we had originally, then we might have been able to have more duplication of that suburban capacity. Yes, here we go. Owen the Signal. Shemai Owen, if studies already show high costs of not working strategically, isn't real question why costs increase far over initial estimates. Don't initial estimates factor known inefficiencies? Yeah, well, yeah. So we're very good. We're very bad at cost estimating in the UK, because I think, again, this becomes a Treasury thing of that we're set up to ensure that Treasury says yes rather than just a realistic view of what the project's going to look like. So, our estimators early stage often go, just assume that the best on that, to basically bump the business case up rather than going, well, we strategically need this thing. We know we need this thing. So it doesn't really matter what the business case says. We're going to build the thing as efficiently as we can, but we know that it has to hit this mark, this mark, this mark. Sorry, I just walloped my chin on the mic, everyone. Right, last question. Gareth, fellow Gareth, Welsh Government have announced they're protecting health and trains in their budget for the next period. There'll be a story on BBC Wales news soon. Oh, thanks very much. I will pop that. So chuck me that in possibly the Discord in the news thing, or DM me or whatever you fancy doing to make sure. Is that explanation of Riley in the episode with you? I think it might be in the episode with me last time, possibly. Possibly just at Riley on Twitter and ask him where his favourite version of that explanation is, because it's a very good explanation. I'll clip it and try and include it in a future episode, because it's very good. Anyway, right, and I'll ask Riley permission again, because it's a really good explanation. Right, anyway, enough from me. Everyone, it's been a pleasure. It only remains for me to wave vigorously. It's ended up being a bit of a longer one. Sorry, an hour and 26 minutes. I'm going to wave vigorously. I'm going to wish you all farewell and say, cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. Thanks for joining. Cheerio.